Hello everyone. Let's make a start. Really good to see so many of you here. Welcome to Unit X and welcome to the Inspira series. Running them slightly differently this year. They're in-person events and we're connecting with the local creative community to be inspired locally rather than globally. But thinking about those contexts that perhaps inspire our work closer to home, working in Manchester. So, this year we're working with Design Factory for the Inspira Talks. We'll be hosting an in-conversation after this. And the idea is to think about the many different ways that we work in cross-disciplinary ways, transdisciplinary ways, things that inspire our practice. So these are kind of cross-department talks to help inspire your thinking. And thinking about those communities and working with Design Factory, I'm going to pass you over to Gemma, who's going to talk to you a little bit about what Design Factory is and what it does.
Thank you. Oh, bright lights. Are we on? Hi everyone, thanks for inviting me up here, Fab. I'm Gemma, I'm a research associate here in the research department in design. Really happy to come and chat to you guys. Manchester Design Factory is a new innovation hub here at Manchester School of Art, and we're using it as a vehicle for our community of practitioners, researchers and students, which is you, to design locally based sustainable development with the potential to reach beyond our city. But we are considering sustainability on materials level, ecologically, economically, environmentally, society, so all kinds of forms of sustainability. We take a participatory approach to designing innovation that is social and inclusive. And the first project that we're working on is an Arts Council Capital Development funded project in collaboration with the town of Stockport and several other partner organisations to drive some creativity and growth within the town centre. Through this activity, Design Factory will be able to apply design thinking and doing to the theme of repurpose, working with creative businesses and social enterprises to actively develop sustainable ways of collectively thriving. Stockport, in this way, could be a microcosm for creating positive change, which works with what we have, and by design, amplifying what we need more of. And really excited that the Inspira series this time is linking in some of those local practitioners to involve them in that conversation. And I'll do a little plug as well if people haven't already signed up for their Unit X project. There is one that's linking up with Stockport, so do sign up for it. I'm going to hand you over to Kevin, who's going to introduce our speakers.
So, hello, my name's Kevin Craig. I'm a senior lecturer on illustration with animation. And I'm just here to introduce the speakers today. Excuse my piece of paper. Folklore and folk tales, they have and always kind of will exist to animate the everyday and ordinary lives. Some folk tales have endured for thousands of years thanks to the power of storytelling and magic from time immemorial. And that's De Silva from New University of London. Thank you. Stories bring us together to listen as communities of people. And they're there to sustain us, to help us engage with and manage the difficulties that we all encounter in our everyday lives. They encourage us to find hopeful, extraordinary, even magical moments within the ordinary. We use stories to reimagine our past, present and futures, and to give us purpose and direction. Both Dave and Julia are storytellers, and folklore is central to their work. The Inspira series of lectures investigates creative practices supporting sustainable communities. So how can illustrators, animators use storytelling as a powerful tool for building communities and empowering change? And that's one of the questions we're going to look at. Okay. So firstly, I'd like to introduce the first of our speakers, which is Julia Soboleva. Okay, take that. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Hello, and thank Thank you for having me today. My name is Julia Soboliva. I'm a UK-based artist, but I was born in Latvia. And talking about stories, I'm going to share a little bit of my story, a little bit of my journey. So I don't really like talking about my art or attaching any specific interpretations to it. I'd rather like to listen to what the world tells me about my art. And I accept every interpretation of it 100%, because I imagine my works to be a type of mirrors, reflecting back to the viewer what is most needed to be seen by them. Some people call me surrealist artist, and I do agree with that. I am a surrealist artist because I like exploring the notions of madness and reality. And, oh yes, sorry. So notions of madness and reality. And I feel that like in our age, with the overload of information and fake news and artificial intelligence, I feel surrealism is actually more real than a rational look at life. So some people call me dark artist, and I agree with that as well, because I like to explore dark forces through my work, but only in contrast to light. And some people call me folklore artist or outsider artist, which I also agree with, because of my intuitive approach to image making. So in my work, I'm guided by instinct, irrationality, impulsive creative expression, and immediate execution. I love the ideas of animism, magic, rituals, and mythology. And I believe myself to be a spiritual person too. So after 14 years of practice, what I have realized that my work can only be seen, at least for me, in periphery. If you look at it straight, with the straight gaze, it turns to stone. So as long as I put it in words, it loses its meaning. So what I do, I talk around my work rather than about. So my childhood home was a quiet, empty flat with rumbling sound of TV and the tickling of an old clock. I was born in Latvia in the exact year where Soviet Union collapsed. And Latvia, as a country, proclaimed its independence for the first time after 60 years of communist rule. I'm part of the Russian minority community in Latvia, so I'm still struggling to make sense of my place against the history of my nation. And I often think how it was to wake up one morning and having the whole world collapsed overnight. And you wake up in a new country, in a new reality, with a new political regime and new official language, and all of the Soviet citizens of the people who were Soviet citizens, they were granted alien passports. So just a very quick background of what was going on. So under Soviet regime, Latvian people suffered an oppressive Russification of their culture. And after gaining its independence, Latvian government applied the same tactics to Russian minorities in the country. My family is a part of this group. So the experience of growing up was inside the little world, which is in the bigger world. So we had our culture, Russian stories, Russian folktale, but it was all happening. For me as a child, I did not feel the big difference because it was the world as I know it. However, now looking back to it, I think it was quite an interesting way of life. So I was raised by my grandmother, and this is not my grandmother, but this is grandmother of someone else, but I think all Eastern European grandmothers look like that. So, so yes, I was raised by my grandmother, and my grandmother survived World War II, and she was from the village. So I grew up listening to a lot of war tales and village tales. Also, my grandmother was very superstitious, so superstitions and magical rituals like predicting your future by looking at the coffee cup, or predicting your future by looking at the patterns of a freshly baked pancake, was very normal way for me to grow up. And also, we had a house spirit living in our flat. And it was a very normal thing to communicate with it and leave treats to it. So yeah, that was interesting. And I think it definitely inspired my work and my creativity now. So we also watched a lot of TV, and there were a lot of Brazilian operas and a lot of crime documentaries. So in my childhood, I had this collage of very eccentric, grotesque influences, and this is how I was building my world. So at the age of 6, I knew I was an expert in the Soviet serial killers. But I was also spending a lot of time in my imagination. On a slide you see the actual snapshots from one of the crime series, crime show I was watching, and I can see a definite correlation of how my work is now and the influences in there. So I was spending a lot of time in my imagination, and another big part for me was being in a theater group, and I was staying in a theater group throughout my whole childhood. And there was one play, and I think it was my most important role I played. It was Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. And I think it was a premonition, so it was kind of reflection of my artistic journey. So yeah, with the TV as well, I forgot to mention, it was a lot of Soviet animation, and Yuri Norstein was one of the most influential animators up until now. This image is from The Hedgehog and the Frog, his most famous animation, but his other stuff, I really recommend to check his work out. And on the other side, it's my work, and I thought it's an interesting connection going on in there. So, this is Domovoy, the house spirit, and on the other side, it's my image of Domovoy. So I moved to UK when I was 18, and I went to study illustration in Southampton Solent University. I was experimenting with all the different mediums. I didn't have any preliminary training in art, and not really an interest in art, to be honest. I wanted to go study theater, but because I could not speak language, my friends just told me, yeah, go study illustration, it's a good course, so I didn't have to speak. And I think my first year I did not speak. But I've discovered the visual language, which was much more powerful than the normal language. And soon after I have finished my studies, my son was born. And having a day job and parenting responsibilities made me question whether I can sustain my practice. I realized that if I wanted to go further in my art practice, I had to find a new method. It wasn't about the work, it was about my approach. So I had to find something that was quick, that was mobile, that I can move around very quickly, that was compact, so I can jump in anytime I have a spare minute whilst the baby is asleep, and when I have a mood for it. So I immediately went to study further because I thought if I'm going to stop now, I will never catch up. That's it. I went to study my master's here at Manchester School of Art. I came to study here with the quest whether I can use intuition as my method. That was the only way. So at first, I thought it was quite an absurd idea, but because I didn't have any other choice, I made it possible. So I've started practicing intuitive image making. I was researching what other scholars, artists had to say about intuition, and it worked. It worked for me. So it was a very exclusively tailored approach that fitted my very limited availability and low levels of energy as a parent of a young child. And this is my method up until now. And my problem was not the images. My problem was the approach, because I used to do things the proper way, with the research, with sketchbooks. But this time, I had to disassemble everything, forget everything I knew about it, and learn again. And I think this was the most transformational and challenging part of my art practice, to accept that some doors have to stay closed, that there is no answer to everything. You have to let mystery be. So when the caterpillar turns to the butterfly, you do not want to rip it apart and see what's inside. Things do not work this way. So for me, this was the most difficult part, to leave things unknown. And it was like putting together a big puzzle, and also accepting, however annoyingly it is, that some pieces stay missed, and leave them like that. So I used to read John Keats, who talks a lot about this position of being okay with things not being 100% certain. This is me finishing my master's degree with finding new approach to my work. And I was reading a lot of Bergson as well about intuition. I'll talk about this a little bit later. And another aspect of my art practice is that I work with photographic images. And my initial thinking was that as an illustrator, I always have to find a source. Where do I start? So it's a book or a piece of music or a story. But I was looking for something very quick and instant. And I thought, how about if I will start illustrating photographs, old photographs. And I liked collage among other mediums, so I went for it. I read Camera Lucida by Roland Barthes, and it was a very inspirational book for me when he talks about the part of what photography is doing within the cultural context. This wasn't interesting for me, but another part, how we respond emotionally to the photograph. And he called it punctium, I think it's a Latin word. So I was mesmerized with this idea of photographic images being matte images. So he calls it mad image chaffed with reality. And I imagine that they're wild, mad animals, the one I have to find and tame. So I started painting on top of photographs as a way of taming them, as a way of, I can't find right words, but I think not giving it new life, no, but helping me to uncover something. I'm sorry, I don't have words for it. So, also looking back at childhood, I was, we had lots of huge family photo albums, dusty, with lots of photographs. Photographs of weddings and funerals, photographs of my male ancestors in military uniform, and female ancestors in beautiful village dresses, pets, animals. And mysteriously, few photographs as well, I do not know why, had faces crossed with red pen. And I think that definitely gave me some ideas of how I can use it later on. Yeah, so for me it was very inspirational finding because photographs inspire me all the time, and then there is abundance of them. And the process of going and searching for them excites me no less than actual making. I go to flea markets, I go to the vintage shops in like market towns, in a basement, all dusty. And I love this process. It's a little bit like an archaeological discovery for me. And it's also an intuitive approach, which photograph I choose and which photograph is better to leave untouched. And it's also a good training for, I don't know how to explain it, it's like visual awareness, because I see thousands and thousands and thousands of images, and each image has something to offer. You know, there will be an interesting contrast in there, there will be a gaze, there will be an interesting composition or something. Some images are, it's very rare, but sometimes I find an image that has like whole world in it. Yeah, these are my experiments from student years, where I was trying different mediums as well. I'm getting there, I think, slowly. Yeah, I like performance, and I like, I guess, sculpting. No, I wouldn't call it sculpting, but making little objects. So there are lots of opportunities. So the way I work is that I make meaning out of my work after the work is done. And it's a little bit like dreaming. We dream a dream, and then we go to the dream book to find the interpretation. What did it mean? And I think if every single of us would have the same dream, I think each of us would have their own interpretation of it. But I'm very careful about, as I said in the beginning, about giving a very direct interpretation, because there is a risk of killing an artwork. And I like how David Lynch talks about it, about the distance between meaning and interpretation. So some things are better to leave them untouched. But then I was looking at my work, and then I realized that it's a world. It's a little bit like an archaeological discovery, that slowly, slowly, I started uncovering whole world. And there were some recurring symbols in there, recurring characters in there, and when I found the archetype concept, things connected to me. So I started learning a bit more about archetype, and archetypes are universal symbols or patterns that reside deep within the human psyche. They're like primal building blocks of storytelling and symbolism, tapping into shared experience across emotions, and emotions across cultures and generations. So that was an interesting discovery, and that's why I'm very, very curious of hearing other people's interpretation of my work, because sometimes I learn a lot about my work from how other people interpret it. And another interesting thing I have noticed is the idea of putting together the opposites, which is, I think, very important idea in archetypes, but this is what I was doing in my work. It's putting light against darkness. It's putting good against evil. It's putting death against birth. And I think what I was unintentionally doing in my work is that I was kind of playing with them contrasts. So making something good look evil and making something evil look serene and inviting, and something that holds goodness in it. So yes, one book I would like to recommend is the Joseph Campbell, The Hero with Thousand Faces, that talks a lot about the structure of the monomyth. It's a universal skeleton of a story. So that was very inspirational for me. And here is a quote from David Lynch about opposites as well. So he says that we all have at least two sides. The world we live in is a world of opposites, and the trick is to reconcile those opposing things. I've always liked both sides. In order to appreciate one, you have to know the other. The more darkness you can gather up, the more light you can see. And this tension, the fire, the electricity between the opposites, that's the magic. So after doing this research, my work became more, like I understand my work much more. So in terms of professional practice, as I said, it took me some time after graduating to find my ground and find ways of working in a way that I can support myself financially, because it was my goal to develop my practice up to the point where I'm a full-time creator, an independent creator. So being trained as an illustrator, I have had little commissions on the side here and there, but then I started using Instagram as my promotional platform, and it was like an amplifier of my ideas, amplifier of my work, and it worked amazing for me. And it's truly like talking about magic. It's a very magical thing. It's a telepathic communication. I make a work in my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, and then I press one button, and then thousands of people see it across the whole world. And everyone has their own story, their own emotion, memory, you know, so it's pretty magical, because I cannot imagine how artists did it when they didn't have social media. So I've got some examples of my commissioned work things I have done here. I mainly work with musicians, making album covers, which is my favorite thing to do, because it's, I guess it's an intuition meets intuition. When with writers, it takes much more work to read the story and disassemble it, reassemble. It's much more challenging. I like it as well, but working with musicians is my favorite. Yeah, here are some of the examples I've done. People probably don't see it. Yeah, but you can come later and have a look. So, yeah, I had my first book published as well 2 years ago, and another one is in the making, which was a very nice way of putting together, because I have a big body of work. I make images every day, and it's nice to have a physical place where they all come together. So, yeah, I also kind of started thinking about merchandise. I'm very careful with it, just to put a little T for sale, just to see how it looks like. So yeah, a lot of ideas where to take it further. Because I think when the world is there, when you have uncovered something, it kind of has a life on its own. It goes around and, you know, connects and brings me opportunities which I never thought possible. Even being here, I don't even know how it have happened. I received an email, come give us a talk, you know? So it's all the work that's all connecting, yeah. So I've got last 2 slides, and I just quickly wanted to share this theory of an ice room, or the darkest hour before the sunrise. It's, I've heard that if you bring a person in the room full of ice and put a radiator in the middle, and start putting the temperature up and up and up and up, nothing happens for a very long time. But then, when the temperature hits 0, the ice suddenly starts melting, and the whole room is filled with water. So I think it's a very interesting and very helpful metaphor for an art practice, you know, because for a long time, it seems like nothing is happening, nothing is moving, but a very consistent approach, showing up for your work day after day after day with a positive approach, then you hit the 0 and things start happening. And another theory is a theory of a selfish artist. But I have another title for this theory, is the theory of the ripples in the water. So the way I imagine it is you throw a pebble into the water and it creates circles around it. So the idea is that as an artist, you have to create as big a circles as possible. So your work has value to as much people as possible. So that's why when people come to me and tell me, I have an imposter syndrome, or I don't have a talent, all these talented people, I don't have a talent, or I'm scared what they say, because they call me weirdo. I don't want to be called weirdo. So this is when the ripples don't go. And it's kind of, you know, it's purposeless. It becomes purposeless, because if you want to keep your art as a hobby, it's okay. But if you want to make a difference, you have to share. And another thing, I don't know if I have time, just quickly, about the idea of diamond, idea of that there exists an interconnected consciousness, and David Lynch talks about it as well a lot in his works, that ideas fly around. And they're not ours. If idea comes to you, it's your job to go and manifest it in a physical world, because they will stop coming. So when someone comes to me, I'm so scared to share my work, a helpful way to think about it, I think, is that it's not even mine. It's my job to share it. because you don't know what this piece of art idea is going to do. You don't know. Maybe it will help someone, inspire someone. So, yeah, theory of a selfish artist. Yeah, and this is another hero of mine, Andrei Tarkovsky. An artist never works under ideal conditions. Thank you very much.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Julia. That was fascinating. That was really, really interesting. And we're going to take questions. We're going to have a little discussion later and have some questions from you as well, hopefully. Okay, so we're just... Are you ready? That was quick. Oh, marvellous. Okay, so I'd like to introduce David Chatton-Barker, Folklore Tapes. Okay, so thank you very much. Thanks.
Nice one, thanks, Bizio. Hiya, everybody. Wow, that was amazing, Julia. Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. I didn't have, my grandma didn't read tea leaves or pancakes, but she made amazing macaroni cheese. Right, so thanks so much for being here and listening to me. My name's David. I'm from Manchester. I live in Todmorden now, which is not so far, like 20 minutes on the train. Studied Art Foundation in Manchester, best year of my life. And then I went down to Devon, where I did fine art, which was an amazing 3 years, totally confusing, wonderful in equal measure, pretty much lost my mind. Found it again, continually lose it, and continually find it. It's a good process. So like Devon, I was doing fine art, so it encompassed all sorts of different approaches, just loads, and I was kind of interested in them all. A lot of what I did was I made stuff up which I'd sort of termed folklore. So rather than folklore, which is something steeped in history, which can be collected and found in archives, books, oral history, I made up stories about the landscape around me and performances based around that. But living in Devon, I started exploring Dartmoor, going for walks and just sort of hanging around. And what I realised is that the folklore that was very much there, embedded in the landscape, was sort of emanating out and finding me. And I was kind of like, well, actually, I don't need to make this up. There's an endless amount of it there to be inspired by. So, when I finished art school, I had a really good momentum. I was doing a lot of stuff outside art school, exhibitions and stuff, and I felt like really propelled. But, when I finished, it was that kind of thing of, okay, money, and I wasn't in a position to obviously just, I wasn't in a position to fund my existence through art. So obviously I took up jobs and whatnot, and kind of lost momentum a little bit, and kind of felt like I needed something to channel my creativity into, a vehicle, like a sort of umbrella, if you like. So because I'd started getting interested in folklore, and I'd been doing researching, I kind of decided to call myself a researcher rather than an artist, because the word artist had, I'd been living that so much doing foundation and the degree, and there was just a lot of kind of trappings with that and a lot of pressure. So I called myself a researcher and started to research into the folklore that was all around me in Devon. And at the sort of same sort of time, I met a friend, who became a friend. Well, he was a friend when I met him, but he became more of a friend, Ian. And he was studying folklore, actually, and he was moving away. And we were like, he was a musician as well as a folklorist. I'd sort of was becoming a bit of an amateur folklorist, and I was also getting interested in music as well, more than just visual art. So we decided to start a project together. He was going up to Edinburgh, I was staying in Devon, in Exeter specifically. So we decided to start a mail art, I was going to say mail order, mail art project, where we would send stuff between each other and develop a project in that way. So, like it says there, yeah, the need of a project to focus my work and this developing interest in folklore, and two friends who wanted to keep in touch. So me and Ian decided to start researching into a specific folklore theme. We chose witchcraft, and we both chose two witches who were accused witches who lived around Devon. And we decided to basically respond to this research once gathered sonically. So to develop a musical interpretation, if you like. We were kind of treating the folklore like, you know, like a film that didn't have a score yet, right? So we were like, right, okay, let's throw ideas back and forth, interpreting these two particular accused witches. And I'll go on to this one. So we decided on a cassette tape, because I and Ian, we were kind of like of the generation where we still use cassette tapes. We really used to making like mixtapes. I mean, cassettes have like blown up massively. It hadn't as much sort of 13 years ago when this project started. Cassettes weren't really what they are now. They'd kind of fallen a little bit by the wayside. But we knew them well, and they were cheap to make. You could make them at home. So basically, we were throwing ideas back and forth on a cassette tape, and in the end, we filled one side each. Let's get to grips with this. So it was like, immediately, the approach for this was that the folklore often had a specific site where you could go to. So immediately this process started to begin where we'd go to the site in question, take photographs, take field recordings, and start to build up this interpretation of the specific, wow, that's loud. Okay, yeah, that's cool, right. So it was quite, as you can tell by that, it was quite like, did I turn it off? That might have been it. No, I think that might have just been a little clip. Oh no, it's back again. So it was kind of like creating this soundtrack to this particular folklore that didn't have sound. So gathering sounds out in the field, perhaps in this specific witch, Marianne Vorden, there was the remains of the house where she lived. So I took recordings from around there, textures, and then built them up through different sounds. So we decided to release it because we thought it sounded quite good and it was quite interesting. So we made 24 cassette tapes, and we thought, right, well, what would be a good way to present them in this multiple format? So we decided to find kind of books that were destined to be pulped, hardback books, and then to present them inside. So we hollowed them out. I've got quite a few examples here today, and this is like the very first one that we did. Hollowed it out, put the cassette tape inside, and then had a little booklet with the research notes as well. So it was kind of immediately, it was this thing of like combining these elements. There was a visual element, a sonic element, and then the research as well. So we already had sort of started this approach to working, I suppose. Right. I've got loads of slides and probably not enough time at all to do them all. So we did 24 of these tapes and we put them out in the world. We put them in a few different record shops and a few bookshops as well, and obviously there were only 24, and they just went immediately. And there was this, we had a little website, and there was suddenly a lot of attention, and there was kind of, because it was music, some musical sites and stuff were starting to, blogs and things were starting to report about what's this mysterious kind of tape inside a book. So we were like, okay, let's carry on. So we started to make some more different ones, choosing different themes: ornithology, inland water, graves, rituals and practices. So all of these, different, I've got two of these things. All of these, like a gunslinger. All of these themes, obviously there was like a lot to immerse yourself in, right? You know, rituals and practices, I mean, how do you even begin to kind of cover that? So, you know, there was always a lot more research than was actually presented in the small booklet that came with them. But then the sort of, the sonic interpretations and the music started to drift into all sorts of areas, as well as kind of, we were starting to ask our friends to do it as well, so it became this little sort of close-knit community of people researching into folklore and then also creating cassette tapes, which had, you know, music, field recordings, sometimes spoken word as well. So another one, superstitions. So immediately from the start, the physicality of this approach was really important, and people were really sort of really responding to the fact that this wasn't, it didn't just come from a printer. These had been like made by the hand and imbued with, you know, like a great deal of love and processes. And people just really responded to it, and it became, you know, quite popular. So editions started to have collected ephemera from the sites where we would go visiting. So this one was, we felt like we wanted to commemorate, again, this is sort of witchcraft one, commemorate the anniversary of, you know, the tragedy of the Pendle witch trials. And in 1612, it would mark the 400 years in 2012. So we decided to commemorate that through responses to the witch trials. And this was the first time that we'd actually done it as a compilation, so we asked 10 different people to respond in their own way, sonically, to this particular event in history. And we presented it in the cassette in a box with a map, research notes, a photograph which was taken in the woods just where the accused were trialed. Each one of the photographs was hand printed, and then also pressed nettle, which was nettles growing around the gravestone of Alice Nutter, who was one of the accused and subsequently one of the people who were hung or hanged. So folklore tapes quickly became like an all-encompassing and all-embracing approach to creating artwork and music and sort of everything in between. And it had become a collective practice as well, because more and more people were kind of getting involved in it. And, you know, from my point of view, it was really nice to be able to commission other people to be part of the project, you know, and it was just really nice. So the first sort of big project, when we kind of realised, hang on, this is sort of becoming bigger than what we'd ever sort of intended it to be. It was only meant to be like a personal vehicle to be able to pour sort of, specifically my creativity into, and a creativity which took on different forms of, you know, artistic expression. So Theo Brown was a folklorist who lived in Devon, where I was at the time, and she was really, really interested She wasn't kind of a sort of stuffy kind of folklorist who wrote in a difficult to sort of engage with sort of way. She was really creative with how she wrote. She was also a visual artist as well. So me and Ian decided her archive was available to go to. So we went to her archive and looked through all her papers, and she'd researched extensively into loads of myths and legends around Devon. So we sort of hatched this idea where we would, kind of as a conduit, we would channel Theo Brown through an expansive project where we would choose 7 villages that she concentrated her research on, go to those 7 villages and pick 7 different particular folkloric myth legends from around there and create those into, sonic interpretations. And then also we decided to try funding out for this, and we were successful with getting Arts Council funding to basically pay for the trip where we camped around the moors. I think we stayed 2 nights in a B&B because, we'd kind of had enough and the weather was vile. So the result was this, which was 7 7-inch vinyl records, each covering 7 villages. So numerology became quite important, and it kind of tied things together in a really nice, holistic way. Theo Brown became like the emblem for it. So it was kind of about her. This is about, she was no longer alive when we did this. So it was a commemoration to this fantastic folklorist. And inside it was a box. And we did, so the boxes weren't handmade. They were made professionally. And so it was a box set with the records inside. There were postcards of woodcuts that she'd done that had never been published before. So it was this kind of archival museum type approach. So along with the music, there was a whole sort of little museum box of maps and research. And then the music for this was things became perhaps a little bit more musical and a little bit more, things started to work really well in terms of collecting sounds. So this organ you can hear is we recorded it in a church called Widdicombe on the Moor, where there was a sort of a random kind of phenomena that happened, which is known as ball lightning. And basically what happened is the whole congregation was singing, and a massive lightning ball came out the sky and went through the church and came out again. So Theo Brown had recorded this, and this was one of the subjects that we responded to. So it was great to go to the church and to be able to capture that sermon, if you like, to use that on the recording. And then our sonic interpretation was quite funky. So it's sort of combining field recordings and then, quite accessible music as well. The project became successful quickly. Why? Yeah, well, I guess we'd chosen a sort of format which was a bit like a record label, although it wasn't, because it was sort of publishing words as well, but then it was also handmade things, and it started to kind of cross over these constellations of art forms and approaches. But I think it was kind of existing in this record label sort of world, which I guess because of that, there was a certain audience that were going towards it. It was a collectability about it, but then it was also expanding audiences into people who maybe wouldn't be as interested in collecting records, but were really interested in the folklore element of it. So things were sort of colliding quite interestingly in terms of potential audiences. And it's always been totally DIY, you know, like I say, hand-stamped things, handmade things. That kind of DIY aesthetic, I think, people, as much as people like professionalism and factory-made books and products, I think when you imbue something with this personal touch, you're kind of getting into interesting areas of even magic with that. And people are quite aware of when something's been lovingly handmade, but then not just as a one-off in a gallery, which is several £1,000s, but a small run of about 100, but each one still with that handmade element. So I'm quite interested in that collision, really. So process is like a really, really big, important part. I've already touched upon it with the project. You know, always starts with research. You know, whatever subject that we choose, research goes first. So to find specific books talking about it, then a site visit. So if it was a megalithic stone circle, for example, go to the stone circle, spend time there, feel part of the place, because things are going to happen in that sort of space that you will never predict. You know, ideas will come. You know, there might be specific, if it's a stone circle, specific alignments which like influence the composition of the music, or they influence the artwork. Gathering materials from the site, like I said, we'd gathered a nettle, and you know, for that one there was 100 nettles, and everybody got a specific nettle. How are we doing for time? I've only just begun. Yeah, right, okay. And then, you know, after collecting materials, field recordings, voice from the site, photographic, all this goes back to the studio, into the cauldron, I suppose. And then, you know, the sort of alchemy starts to happen, and the interpretation happens, and then, you know, the music's recorded, and, you know. So process is absolutely key. And then finding a way to get that out into the world. Like I said, I'm really interested in the sort of the physicality of this. We've never done social media or anything, which is, you know, quite interesting on the flip side to what Julia was saying. All of this stuff has been made to be sort of left to be found, often by chance. But then also we do have a website, so people can go to it and discover it and order it from there too. So these are some shots from a book. Just they're not great photos. I just took them last night of some field recordings. So here there was a water harp which was put into a specific pool which had a lot of folklore around it. The harp itself was played by the water. Again, like the actual landscape is having leaving its mark on the music and the sounds. I'll go through these. Right, so for me, like, I didn't come into this as a musician. I came into it as a visual artist. My whole language was visual, whether it be photographic, film, collage. But I was really interested in this thing of creating a soundtrack to this kind of folkloric film from the past, through sound and music, you know, kind of digging up bones and animating them once again. So what I started to do was make my own instruments out of all sorts of stuff, out of junk, out of like normal guitar strings, various bits of metal. And I started developing my own sonic language through these objects. Again, the photos aren't great. And they were mine, you know, so how they were played was kind of up to me. There was no sort of massive lineage of like, you know, tonality and like ways to play these instruments, because I'd constructed them to create the sort of sounds that I wanted to create based on these particular legends. So natural intervention is another big part of what happens during field trips. Stanton Drew Stone Circle was a place of super concentrated energy. I spent quite a long time there, and I had slide film. I decided to take a picture of each of the 60 odd stones, processed them, went back there and decided to bury each photographic slide underneath each of the stones. Left them there for another few months, came back, and then this is what they kind of ended up looking like. So you've got this natural intervention started to work its way into what would have been quite an ordinary slide of the stones. I'm interested in that intervention in terms of that unpredictability where I didn't put that bit of paint up. That's not paint, you know, this is a biochemical reaction. But I like the fact that I set something up there and nature took it somewhere else. And then it's like, oh, right, okay, collaboration with nature. Another way that that's happened is a project which, I mean, the cover for this was made by automatic drawing with ink and then left out in the rain to then create quite an abstract sort of image, which again, each one different, 300 different rain paintings were made. And then the main premise for this one was to leave the instruments out, these handmade instruments out in the rain to be played, not just by the rain, but by the wind as well. So we're kind of getting into this area of kind of, is it music? I mean, it's not composed music, but it is made by the elemental forces. And this is where this kind of magical, natural phenomena comes in, which I love because, you know, I make the instrument, but I leave it up to nature then to compose the music. I realise I'm kind of jumping through quite a lot of different things here, but I guess just want to give you this idea that by creating this umbrella of folklore and being inspired by everything that's within it, so much so in a sort of conduit sort of style, I'm working in ways that I would never have predicted, you know, which, you know, but it feels like supernatural. Self-worth, self-publication. Not sure what I meant. No, I do know what I meant by this. Don't, you know, like, this is the kind of pep talk, motivational element. But I guess what I feel is that I've been doing this for 13 years, and not one time have I ever sort of been like, oh, do you want to put this out? Oh, you know, you up for releasing that record? Or I'm not kind of, I've just got my own thing going on, and I just feel super like that I want to share this, you know. So it's like, I think self-publication is like a really big thing. I mean, like I started with zines and all that sort of stuff in my teenage years, and I feel like I'm sort of still there. I've risen the bar a bit in terms of aesthetic, I suppose, and in terms of how things are put together, but it's still got that DIY approach, and it's always just self-published. Collaboration to expand your project potential and audience. Yeah, I think like this project wouldn't have gone where it's gone to if it hadn't have become a collective family of practitioners. I think there's been about 45 different artists who have worked with the project so far, and it just feels like a lovely thing. So there's been so many different releases. Collaborative compilations, these are some of the themes that we've done: the folklore of plants, UF folklore, fairy lore, calendar customs. So the folklore of plants, what I loved about this one is that you got a pack of seeds with each release, with the idea that you yourself could grow a plant. And also each cover was hand pressed, printed by, so I collected different plants, pressed them, dried them inked them up, and then each one of those created a different album cover. That's some of them there, and more things. I brought some things you can look at. Posters, yeah. Oh. Oh. Wow. What does that mean? Does that mean time's up?
No, that's the end.
Is it? Oh, no, there should be more.
Nature's interfering again.
Or maybe they didn't all.
Oh,
Yeah.
Google.
Right, cool. There's some posters. I'm going to go a bit quicker now. Books. There's some books. I'll play you a nice bit of music. So this was like a collaborative book publication where I rewrote some specific bits of fairy lore, and then commissioned 2 artists to produce different artworks based on them. So there was some woodcuts and some paintings, and then also myself and my main collaborator Sam, we created a soundtrack to that book, and then so it was all kind of like, it all came together as one immersive thing. One of the projects that we did was a collaboration and residency with the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. When we were there, I'm kind of talking about collaborative things here because I think it's worth saying. We were in the archives of, if you've never been, the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic is just the most inspiring place for any type of artist. We found a whole box of index cards which refer to objects in the museum which had gone missing. So we were like, oh, this is amazing, you know. And these cards describe the objects, but the objects were no longer there. So it was like, right, what a great kind of big kind of collaborative commission thing. So we mailed out the cards to 35 different artists and asked them to interpret these index cards however they saw fit, and it became a touring exhibition. That's one of the objects. So some of them were 3D, some of them were 2D. And there was also a performance that toured with the exhibition using our own magical objects that we'd made. Performance. Yeah, performance came quite quickly for me in terms of an extra way to sort of share my work. And the performances have sort of come around in all sorts of different ways over the years. It's just an extra part of the sort of the language of sharing these projects, I suppose. So I'm just going to quickly say about Lark Song, which is the last commission that we got. I suppose that's the other thing as well, is we've started being asked to do stuff as well sometimes, which is quite nice. So Lark Song was for the British Textile Biennale last year. We were asked to visit an old chapel, research into its folklore, and develop a live show and a record based on the history of the building. We worked with the natural dyer there were 4 of us who hand-dyed 4 garments, ritual garments for us to wear whilst we were doing the performance. She'd gathered around plants that grew around the chapel and dyed the garments with that. Here's some shots of the performance, which used adapted spinning wheels. It was kind of relating to the textile industry, different types of shadow puppetry, and also harmonium as well. We wrote some songs based on some of the grave inscriptions outside the chapel. So again, like reinterpreting, giving life to the old. And then there was a lot of projection work with plants as well. And I'll finish there, Speedy. I hope you got something from that. I'll just play the record that we made at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, am I on? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, David. That's wonderful. Really some lovely ideas and insights into practice there. So I think we're just going to have we've got a couple of questions, and then we're going to throw out some questions to you if you've got any questions for either Julia or David.
Great.
Yeah.
Julia, do you want to come up and have a seat?
Are we sitting?
Yes. You can dance around too.
We're like the worst boys-on tribute band. Stand up on the key.
You're pretty convincing, actually. Yeah, you got a bit of a, what was he called again, the main singer?
Oh, Ronan.
Yeah, a bit of a Ronan thing going on there. Yeah, an absolute compliment, by the way.
Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much. So, yeah, no, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, really
You were brilliant.
really interesting insights into process. But I think it's particularly interesting that you both talk about magic in such a way. Is there? I mean, in these strange times we're living in, do you think magic is still as important in everyday life, or do you think it's sort of becoming less important these days? Or how do you feel, both of you, how magic really relates to kind of everyday life and your own practices? A little bit.
I go first?
Okay. Well, I mean, for me, I suppose I spoke about it in that, you know, for me, the sort of one of the greatest forms of magic is nature. And the phenomena and the depth and the profundity that can be found within nature, whether it be the sort of, the patterns of a leaf, to the fact that the wind blows. And I know that scientifically these things can be explained, but I think there's also another element to them which, for us to pay attention to them can be a really powerful thing for our sort of day-to-day. And the mindfulness of nature, I think, is something to always keep mindful of.
I think of magic in a way I think about intuition, I guess. And I think because we live in a society as it is, and I think some qualities of being a human, like being rational, logical, productive, responsible, these are the qualities which are celebrated and enhanced, whilst intuition or magic or irrationality, these are the qualities which are kind of, we don't really talk about them in a way we talk about other stuff. So I think, to me, magic, like when I think about magic, in Russian, magic, magia, I heard somewhere it comes from the word magu, I can. So if we think like, let's say I just want to have an ice cream now, so I need to make certain actions to get an ice cream, okay? But the actual result, I've got an ice cream at the end of it. So I think it's the will. I think it's about working with the will. It's about how you define it, So I think you can make things possible which other people would say magic, but actually it's the, there is a part in between which we don't talk about when magic happens.
That kind of the potential in us all, really, I think, which is far greater than a lot of us would give ourselves credit for, like actually the sort of actualization, the manifestation that we can do individually is without a doubt, profound, isn't it? Like what we can will into being. I think like working at the Witchcraft and Magic Museum of Witchcraft and Magic, the majority of the objects in there are handmade, beautiful artworks. But what's interesting about them is that they were made with magical intent. So what I find really interesting about the art of magic is, as artists, we're kind of magicians as well. It just depends what we imbue with our process, with our touch, with our craft, right? Witchcraft. So yeah, well done for all being witches and mages.
Hey. Just to build on that, that's really interesting. I absolutely agree with both of you about what you're saying. And I find it really interesting that both of you refer to this idea of chance in your work. So, you know, you say about natural interference and you talk about intuition, which I think you both use in a very similar way. It's really interesting. So what role do you think chaos have in your work? Do you intentionally invite it in to discover something new or to collaborate with?
I'm sorry, what intuition plays?
Yeah, what role does chaos play in your work for it?
Chaos, yeah. I think chaos exists only in contrast to the order, you know, so to me they're opposing forces, order and chaos, and destroy things and start anew, destroy things and start anew. It's a very natural cycle of life. So I think it's embracing it, and you know, it's an opportunity to create something new, I guess. You know, because you can make chaos out of everything. It depends how you look at it. Because we are here a compilation of atoms sitting on, you know, not sitting on chairs, just being in the. It depends how we look. Or we can look at it as ordered, you know. So yeah, it just depends what kind of stance you have, but it's very important. I think it holds everything together, chaos and order, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, Julia's sorted that one out, which is perfect.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Watching you both talk, the other thing that I saw, connection between the two things is, there's this idea of like real world truths. Julia, in your case, I was looking at the photographs that you found, and these, you know, these in a sense that they are truths. And then David, your work around, even if it's just collecting stories in the landscape and whatnot. But then your work also deals with kind of larger truths than that aren't perhaps immediately apparent in those objects that you find. So Julia, I was thinking the way that you overpaint with collage. Do you think that blending of the real world truth and then that kind of personal truth, is that really important in folklore and magic? Is that something that is...
Yeah, I mean, I think with, personally anyway, you know, for folklore contains so much pertinent stuff for now and for the future. You know, like you think, oh yeah, that's like 100 years old, but a lot of these folk tales and these legends, you know, they contain really valuable seeds of truth, which, you know, we can be the sort of, the kind of gardener for that, if you like, and kind of, if you like that kind of metaphor, and to, you know, to sort of, to grow these things into the present, to kind of, to contain like a lot of meaning, I think. That's what I find, is that like, the folklore is very, very much real now and for the future. But I lost my thread there.
I don't even know how to answer this question, because I think with no truth, I think it takes, at least for me, to feel what's true, I need to educate myself a lot, you know, because you have to look from very different perspectives into something you want to find truth about. And then you have to experience it yourself, not to believe what you have heard, what someone told you. And then, after a long while, you can make your own conclusions. and then you juxtapose it with the bigger. It's a very complicated question for me at the moment, yeah. But for me, I think at the heart of it is just education. And also a great thing is to talk to people who have opposing views to you. I think this is a very great way to find what's true. Or even taking as a play, taking a position of someone you disagree with. Okay, I think like them. And I think it was like a great exercise. Yeah.
Playing devil's advocate.
Yes.
Just not an observation, it's more of an observation, a question. It's really interesting that you both kind of look at your work from a point of view of almost like archaeologists. Because Julia, you talk about how each of your paintings is actually a window to a larger world, and you've also talked about this here, which I find fascinating, because you're slowly, piece by piece, creating something that is already there, and you're just speaking in. And Dave, you are recording something that is already there. So yeah, how do you feel about being an archaeologist from your practice? It's a fascinating perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, I definitely consider myself to be a conduit, you know, like I think in the same way that, you know, Julia said, there's only a certain amount of control that I allow myself to have. But yeah, I would consider myself to be, yeah, I'd sort of channel this stuff and allow it to sort of speak through me to a certain extent. I only come in with so many kind of intentions about where it's going to end up. And again, like Julia said, you know, after the pieces of the pot, so to speak, have been exhumed, and maybe it's put together in some sort of way, then kind of to look upon it and to come up with some sort of meaning after that. But this, yeah, it's kind of a, yeah.
But do you feel like places call to you? Or,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And when I'm there, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, that's why I'm here. And it can happen in all sorts of different ways. I mean, I suppose for me, like, my art life and my day-to-day life have become so blurred now that, yeah, sometimes it's like, I mean, I've not even bothered to sort of switch on and off because I'm just always switched on. So I think, like, in terms of that being called, that can happen in so many different ways that I just consider it to be like, you know, a sort of, yeah, being in harmony, I suppose, with this greater force. You know.
Have you made work about somewhere outside UK? Because most of your work is quite local, is that right?
Yeah, it's mostly here, but I've done a little bit in France. I'm half French, so it's kind of
so the roots
drawn
there
towards kind of starting to explore there a bit as well.
I love how you said when you collect all the data, and it's interesting that it's from very different senses, sonic, eyes, like, and then you come together and put it in a cauldron.
Yeah,
and then it's very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's like when you put the sound and seeing all the visuals, it's like you are there. I had an experience that I am there. Yeah.
I think, yeah, this kind of like different version of being a tourist guide and taking someone around a place. But obviously everybody's interpretation of a place is different. So I guess my approach combines my individualism a little bit because of certain decisions that have been made and certain choices, but then also the sort of the spirit of the place as well. I just think there's so many different ways to experience something. I mean, I'm only exploring a small part of that.
Yeah, I do think like, the idea particularly, Julia, you were talking about intuition quite a lot, and that was what your MA research was around, the idea of intuiting. In that case, where do you think you're intuiting from? From outside of the world, or from yourself, or is it a connection between the two? Or?
No, I think where intuition comes from, that's a difficult question.
Oh, I know, sorry.
Have anyone answered to this where intuition comes from? I guess it's the counterpart to rationality and logic. It's the moments when you dance and enjoy yourself dancing, or when you do something you love so much. It's the flow. It's a flow. It's when you are unaware. Like, I feel children, all of the children have the best intuition ever. When you spend a lot of time alone, it's a very, very precise knowing what's right. It's kind of your gut, you know, because I think we all know the truth. We all know where we lie to ourselves, you know. We all know it deep, 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 deep inside, you know. So, but I also think, I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know yet. But I think it's a very normal, down-to-earth skill, a part of being human. And I'm talking about it everywhere, you know. It's a very normal, it's a skill that can be developed if you train, like going to the gym, the same. Yeah, because my intuition wasn't up there. I was thinking very logically, you know, but it developed because I was training it. I was learning, reading about it, practicing. I want to dance, I don't care. I want to post my dancing online, I don't care, I do it because I like it. Whatever, you know, and this is like being honest with yourself, because it's your life, your world, you know, and yeah.
Yeah, I think that thing about childhood, you know, is that it's like that sweet time, you know, and that spontaneity and you know, which I think is very much part of the same family as intuition. And you know, it's where chaos comes in as well, of like not overthinking something, you know, and just allowing it to pass through in a very kind of natural way.
So I might see if there's anyone. Does anyone have any questions out? Anyone? Oh, yes. We have. Yeah.
Transport the,
Okay.
the mic.
Hello. Really great talks. Thank you so much. You touched upon it just then with the discussion.
Yeah.
I'm just not loud enough. With the discussion around intuition, and you're saying how actually it wasn't there at first. To work with it. I was curious, Salida, you talked about things sort of happening through collaboration. It almost seems like everything happened naturally. And Grace, and it was mentioned of imposter syndrome in your talk, Julia, and I'm sure it's something that students can relate to. I certainly can, the kind of moments when you can stagnate your practice because you overthink it. Have you got any kind of thoughts or reflections on how that has changed through your practice? Like, are you both in a place where it comes easy now, or do you have to be quite proactive? So Julie, you talked about drawing every day. Like, is that something you consciously have to get up and think, okay, I must do that today, or does it just happen?
Oh, absolutely the first one. Absolutely the first one. Practicing every day, you know. Sometimes I hate it, I don't want to do it. But it's also, I found out that when you reduce importance of it, it's about decisions you make, and it's about allowing yourself to think the way it fits you. So reducing the importance. I decided to myself, I do art. That's it. It's my extension. It's not something so important and so precious. It's not a baby. It's part of me. I decided it, and this is how it is. So for me, this is magic, basically. I decided it, and this is how it is. And then, that's it. There is a contract I signed with myself that I make art every other day, or like every day, whatever, once a month. It has to fit your own lifestyle, and then you do it. But reducing importance is not like, oh, I need to do it. It's just kind of, it's also helpful, I found, to do it in between tasks. Right, I have this hour, doesn't matter. I sit down, do an art. That's it. It's done. And then when you don't try, it's the best art. So it's like reducing importance, but also, yeah, it's boring. It's you don't want to do it. It's like that. It's not an easy. It's not just like that.
I think for me, like a key sort of text. It's a small book. Actually, it's been printed in various sizes, but it's a Chinese text called the Tao Te Ching. That's been like really big for me, and I think you hit upon like a key kernel of that book, which is not trying You know, essentially what it is, it's a lot about kind of responding to nature. You know, nature's not like, nah, rivers doesn't go like, you know what, I'm not going to flow today.
Yes.
That's just what it is, and it's what it does. I mean, so the Dowdy Chink, check it out, it's great. I have it in my toilet, perfect combo. Receptive state. But for me, like, I don't know when I chose to do art, but like now, if I don't do it for however long, and I don't know how long that is, I get ill. That's it, bottom line, you know. Whether that be like a physical manifestation or whether that be ill in the head, you know. So I kind of like, I'm at the point where, yeah, I'm not even realizing I'm doing it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Me too. I
Any more
also get ill,
questions?
very depressed. Yeah.
Hi guys, I was just wondering, do you ever feel like technology gets in the way of this intuition kind of flow, whether it be kind of publishing your work, printing things, working on the computer, or social media?
Yeah, all of that. I'm in a funny sort of relationship with it. I think I always have been, really. Like, I think for me, like, live performance and live interaction like this is kind of like the perfect state, because obviously there's technology which is in command here, but essentially this is a really natural state between us, and a natural state of connectivity. I think, like, you know, social media and everything, as much as I know, I mean, it's been amazing for you, you know, I'm just like, you should see my phone. I've got, you know, a button phone. All I can do is call and text on it, because I'm just like, there's also part of me which is, I know myself too. I know that if I get a super duper whiz phone, yeah, I'm kind of worried that what that might do to me. So I'm kind of positively in the past, but yeah, more trepidatiously going into the future. Yeah, and I know that because of not choosing some forms of technology, I've definitely slowed down or not gone as far, perhaps, with my artwork as I might have been able to. But that's just because I know that I don't want to do certain stuff, you know. I need to keep it real for myself in certain ways. I've just got certain things. Yeah.
I think
But it's a great question, man, and I could go on forever about that.
It's a really important point, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we put ourselves out there? And there are loads of different platforms that we can use, but also just being creative about the way that we broadcast ourselves, if we want to do that. I mean, I went to one of your events, went to one of David's events in Bake Up. I don't know if you know Bake Up, but I found out about it through someone just giving me a flyer in the local pub. And what a lovely way to discover it, because there was no other way to really know about it. So it wasn't online, it was just through meeting and talking to people. And there's a real value in that, I think, in thinking about the way that we interact with each other creatively. But also it relates to that DIY approach to things and what we think is professional.
Yeah.
And maybe it's good to think about professionalism, unprofessionalism, and the
that
value
balance,
in...
that balance is really, really important, I think, and how those two things make you feel, you know, how, you know, your artwork almost solely existing through a digital platform, how that, and then, or, you know, you might not know what it feels like to do a more physical, in-person type thing. So I think it's important to find your own balance of those two things, because we live in a time where you can't choose one or the other. Really, I don't think we can, but I mean, I think the balance, it's all about balance.
Yeah, I think it's about finding, treating social media as your tool, you know. It's deciding, making your own rules, how it's going to work for me. So,
I think it was interesting that you, really interesting, and I was into it, that you described, you know, your experience with Instagram magically.
It is.
Yeah.
It was like magic,
totally,
because for
yeah.
someone like with having responsibilities I had in my life, having a young child and having young family and having to fully sustain myself, what normality was telling me that I can't be an artist, I don't have time for it, you know. But with social media, with Instagram, because it's a different perception of time and different perception of space. So it worked magically for me because I decided that it's going to be like that. I decided that this is how I'm going to use it. I'm going to express myself, and it also helps me to be more free and, you know, it's amazing having interactions as well with people who follow your work and making friends, and it's constant inspiration. I started dancing, and then there is a bunch of women who say, Julia, we've seen you dancing, it's crazy, but we dance as well now. And I go on Instagram and all these wonderful women dancing, and they don't care. And I think this worth it so much, and this is a real magic for me.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, your experience of that. And on the flip side, I think like a lot of the multiples, I guess, that I put out into the world, I don't know where they end up. So I don't know how my artwork in that respect is going down, you know, how people are reacting to it. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't get a letter that comes back with a comment saying, hey, dude, really dig it, you know. So I'd say, like, I think that's so interesting that you hear so much about how people feel about your artwork. Because actually, you know, that's something that other than like in situations like this, live situations and gigs and stuff, a lot of the time I do get the odd email from someone saying I really enjoyed this that you did and stuff, but nothing compared to what I imagine to be the comments and likes and things that that happen. So I think those two things are really interesting because they're very different, aren't they?
I feel like kind of in your practice, it fits so nicely that you're secret.
Secret, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it kind of makes the whole circle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The true occult.
Yeah, true occult. Yeah, well put.
Any more questions?
You spoke a lot about truth in your work, and in the way you like tell your stories, I guess. But I was wondering how you feel lies can be interpreted in your work, not necessarily in contrast to the truth, but as like a stretching of the truth or untruth in a way.
You specifically, the two of us, yeah. Yeah.
It's a very interesting question. I think I just need to think about it a little bit.
I think folklore is like a great area because, is it true? I think there's always a seed of truth that runs throughout it, but I think a lot of the time, you know, we've got very little evidence to go off, I mean, with some stuff, and I love that, and I love that, how playful that can be, you know. I did a project in a town that I'm not going to tell you about, all about folklore. So I installed plaques, you know, the plaques that you get on buildings that say, you know, da-da-da lived here and he was a carpenter, the blue ones, yeah. Well, I did a project where I installed 6 plaques, which I presented as being true characters and things that had happened in the town. None of them were. Does it matter? Do you know what I mean? Because the idea for me was that, well, people will see this, it's like, it's a plaque, there's this official thing, heritage plaques and all that, so people are going to look and it might start some really interesting bit of folklore from it. But it started off as being folklore. But in 100 years' time, people will be walking down the town and they'll be like, oh, do you know, this happened here? And they'll be like, no way. Like, one of them was about a UFO sighting. And I mean, the thing is, what if it was true? You know what I mean? It's like, I really like that blurring of fact and fiction, places in between, and does it really matter? As long as no one gets hurt.
Yeah. I think it's every truth is a bit of a lie, because it's like every story has a lie in it. In a way, it depends how you look at it, because stories are told by the personal experience, and no one has the same experience. So, I think it's a very interesting concept, like truth and lie. But I think it also maybe comes to the ideas of like identity, because I do a lot of work connected to identity, masked. I like masks. So we build identities, they are not given. Identities, personalities. I don't know exactly how to answer this question, but it made me think about that everything is a lie in a way, and everything is truth as well.
Yeah, great question.
Back there. Oh, go to the back.
And one in the front as well.
Stick your hand up. Who'd like to ask a question? At the back.
I'm a master's student. We have like a module that's based on like. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So we have a module based on audience. So I was wondering whether the audience was something that you guys keep in mind, because they'll have different sort of responses to your works. So has that ever restricted your work, or has that ever affected the kind of work that you create?
Good question. Did you hear it?
I didn't catch the whole question, sorry.
It was kind of, I suppose, the long and short of it was how the audience affects, or has it changed how you create your work? I think that was the
audience, yeah?
Audience.
Yeah.
And so how the audience, how the viewer changes the work.
Or has it changed how you work?
I think it's 100% at all times part of the artwork, because there is no artwork without the viewer. Maybe it's a great idea to try create a piece artwork without a viewer, but I think viewer is all the time part of the artwork. Yeah.
Change the way that you work?
I guess it kind of shaped the way I work, because after I have disassembled my whole methodology, I kind of started working in a new way. I started using intuition, and I started using Instagram straight away. So it shaped how I work. And I think I always have in mind the format as well of Instagram. And I do realize that it might not be the best influence, but this is how it was. This is how it came to life. Yeah, but it depends how you look at it. If you take it as a negative experience, it will be a negative experience. But if you look at it positively, then it can be a very positive thing. It's almost like a collaborative, you always interact. You give energy, you get energy back. You give energy, you get energy back. So it depends how you structure it yourself, so it doesn't drain you, so it doesn't make your artwork or your process less off in any way,
Yeah, I think not knowingly anyway. I don't think knowingly the audience has changed my approach, but unknowingly maybe. And then, in terms of my approach to, because I guess I'm dealing with quite a few different ways of presenting stuff as well, that maybe unconsciously and consciously I have sort of collaborated with the past to present something which I would consider to be my own sort of, but you can't help what you see and stuff. I suppose I'm blurring it a bit, because obviously that's not the audience per se, but I feel like, my style and approach and stuff, it has a lot, it is very much influenced by the past, in the same way that we're all effectively a collage of everybody we've ever met. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I'm not consciously influenced, but yeah, I would be, I think, a liar if I said that I wasn't, somehow.
Okay, I think we have one more question, was it? Yeah, just one more, please. And then one question. Yeah. Sorry, we're keeping you here forever.
It's all right.
I just had one, if at one point, art can't sustain you financially, right? How do you have to do your needs, obviously pay bills and all things. How do you sustain yourself creatively and making sure that piece of you doesn't die and start viewing the world differently?
Yeah.
A piece of me is already dead, because managing the administrative part of being an artist is a huge learning curve, a total nightmare. And it's about delegation. It's about getting to the place eventually. At first, like, you have to do it all yourself. And I still do it. I got an accountant, that's one thing. But all the other stuff I have to do. But I realized that the escape from it in future is delegation, finding people who will do it for you. But keeping the accounts, paying taxes, administrative tasks, running the shop, processing art prints I have sold, this takes like 80% of what I do. But I tell myself that it's my job as an artist to find ways that I can do it and not die, you know, so it's okay. So eventually that I can only do artwork. I don't know whether I'll be 80 years old when I get there, but it's very, very complex. And I think this is why being an artist is a very complex profession. It's a very complicated, you know, I don't like all these myths about artists being disorganized and all of that. It's a myth that has to go because it's not the truth. It is not truth. You know, it's a very, you have to have lots of responsibility, lots of energy, and it's constant work. How do I structure it all? How do I do it so it works? So it's a very difficult and very challenging, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, with Folklore Tapes as a project, I intentionally not doing that in a way that is the only channel of money which sustains me, because I consciously don't want to get into a position where I'm doing projects to make money, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of intentionally do that. I do other things as well. I mean, I work a shift at a pub a week because that grounds me, man. You know, that's like actually that's like a really positive thing in the spectrum of it all, because I'm not kind of leaning on this one thing to live off. I don't know, like Julia's saying, it's a really complicated one, but it's that thing of I don't want to be thinking too much about creating to get money from it. I don't want that to infect too much the process of creation. So yeah, I don't know. It's a great question, and there's a lot going on with that. And like you say, you know, yeah, the management of it is
very challenging. Yeah, I just had a thought that I can recommend Association of Illustrators, and there are many. It's the abbreviation AOI. So whoever has a career in illustration, they are absolutely excellent. I've signed up for them. I'm staying with them for years. They provide all of the licensing information, all the contracts, copyright. And it's my advice is just to have a week or so and sit down and learn it all inside out, because later on you won't have any problems with licensing and contracts, and you know what to answer to your clients, because sometimes you have to educate clients, you know, like with copyright, for example. If people think, no, people just don't know about what is usage license, and that, you know, when someone pays you money to use your work for something, it's not their work, like, it's still, copyright is yours. And yeah, how important is to never ever sell your copyright as well.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It's been really, well, it's been genuinely magical. No, but thank you so much. So Julia Soboleva and David Chatton-Barker, thank you all for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. Okay, thanks.
Lovely, thank you very much, everyone. That's our first Inspira talk over for tonight, but please do have a look. We've got one every Thursday, 5 till 7. Please come along. Thank you.